Before I get started, can you see my screen okay? It's just one slide for now, but does that position look good? All right, great. And before I get started, I would like to make a brief disclaimer. This speech may contain potentially intense or sensitive material. All right, if we're all good with that, I have 0 minutes and 0 seconds on the clock, so if you guys are ready, all right, we'll go ahead and get started. This is Roxanne Loper, and this is her story as told by award-winning journalist Jim Newfoundland in his book, The Day the World Came to Town. Because they weren't able to have biological children, Roxanne and her husband Clark decided to adopt an orphan named Alexandria from the nation of Kazakhstan. After months of navigating the incredibly difficult international adoption process, they traveled to Kazakhstan and picked up 2-year-old Alexandria. And as Roxanne boarded the plane that would take them back home to Texas, she knew that after all what her family had been through, it was only a few more hours until everything would be back to normal. The date was September 11th, 2001. Where were you on 9/11? This is a question that's always fascinated me, probably because I don't have my own answer, but everyone who remembers that fateful day has a different story to tell. And today I want to tell you one such story. A story of how in the wake of a generation-defining tragedy, a tiny town was able to shine a light of hope in the darkness. This is the story of Gander, Newfoundland on 9/11. We'll first look at the departure, how this powerful story takes off, and where Gander fits into the story of the 9/11 attacks. Then we'll discuss the diversion, how thousands affected by the 9/11 attacks were welcomed into Gander. And lastly, we'll discuss the destination, how Gander left a legacy of kindness that continues across nations, decades, and generations. But first, what even is Gander, and where does it fit into the story of the 9/11 attacks? Gander is a small town in the Canadian province of Newfoundland, and it's home to the largest strategically located Gander airport, according to CNN. But that's not all there is to know about Gander. Its people are incredibly compassionate. Jim Newfoundland, in his book that reported on Gander's response to 9/11, quoted Gander Town Constable Oz Fudge as saying, quote, "A Newfoundlander likes to put his arm around a person and say, it's going to be okay. That's the way it's always been, that's the way it always will be, and that's the way it was on September 11th. Unquote." So where does Gander fit into the story of the 9/11 attacks? To know this, we'll need to briefly examine the events of that fateful day. According to the University of Virginia, between 7:59 and 8:42 a.m., 4 airline flights take off from various locations across the United States and are hijacked midair. Between 8:46 and 9:37, 3 of those 4 flights crash into both towers of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And by 9:45 a.m., the order is given to completely shut down United States airspace. As noted by Jim Newfoundland writing for the Times, never in history had the entire U.S. airspace been shut down, and there were 400 international flights already in the air heading for the United States. Most didn't have enough fuel to turn around and return to where they started from, so they had to find somewhere else to land, and fast. And that diversion is where Gander's story really begins. In midair over the Atlantic Ocean, Roxanne Loper felt her plane take a sudden, sharp turn. And soon the pilot announced that due to a situation occurring in the United States, they would be making an emergency landing in Gander, Newfoundland. And they weren't alone. Jim Newfoundland reports that 38 planes carrying 6,595 passengers made safe emergency landings in Gander that day. The town's population had nearly doubled in the space of just a few hours. And all of these 6,595 people were stranded in an unfamiliar place with nothing to eat or drink in the wake of perhaps the most traumatic event of their lifetimes. So what could such a little town in the middle of nowhere possibly do to help? Well, Gander got to work. Jim Newfoundland notes that after the Loper family's plane landed and lengthy security checks were completed, they were ushered to a fleet of school buses, which drove them along with many fellow passengers to a local Lions Club. This, along with schools and organizations all across town, had been quickly converted into emergency shelters for the stranded passengers. Once arrived, they gathered around a television and, for the first time that day, finally understood the events that had happened in New York that day. It was a day that left 2,000 977 American citizens dead, according to the BBC. And all across town, stranded passengers were devastated by the horrors of the day. But the people of Gander were willing to do whatever it took to help them. The morning of September 12th, a huge group of volunteers showed up at the Lions Club and cooked breakfast for everyone staying there, and a woman the local family had seen or spoken to in their entire life invited them into her home and let them use her personal home shower. All across town, scenes like this played out as the people of Gander spared nothing to make the stranded passengers feel at home. Restaurants donated huge amounts of food, pharmacies helped passengers find needed medication, even golf courses let the mentally exhausted passengers play for free. The only problem was there weren't enough golf clubs to go around. So the owner of the golf course contacted all of his local patrons and asked if he could borrow their clubs for the stranded passengers. Everyone said yes. Churches around Gander also stepped up to help. Defeat tells the story of a tiny Baptist church who opened their doors to around 40 refugees from Moldova, including many young children and 3 pregnant women. They were flying to the United States to flee persecution for their Christian faith when the attacks happened, and the church made sure they were all well fed and taken care of. When a stranded U.S. military intelligence officer was taking a walk down the streets of Gander to clear her head, a local family stopped her and asked if she was one of the plane people. Upon hearing she was, they promptly invited her into their backyard to help them celebrate their son's 7th birthday party. These are just a few of the thousands of stories that could be told about what Gander did for the stranded passengers. Jane Defeat sums up the enormity of the kindness shown in Gander by saying, quote, "For the better part of a week, nearly every man, woman, and child in Gander placed their lives on hold for a group of strangers and asked for nothing in return. If the terrorists had hoped their attacks would reveal the weaknesses in Western society, the events in Gander proved its strength." End quote. According to the Times, 2 days after the attacks, U.S. airspace was reopened. And by 5 days from their original arrival, all the plane people were on their way home. But this isn't the end of the story of Gander, because Gander's kindness left a legacy that the stranded passengers carried with them to their destinations and beyond. Take, for example, the Loper family who were stranded in Gander after adopting Alexandria. In a 2020 article for CBS News, Roxanne discussed how important the events in Gander had been in shaping their family. She said that the story of the kindness they experienced has been told to Alexandria time and time again as she's grown. And it's become a part of their family's identity to continue to share that kindness whenever someone needs it. Roxanne put it like this, quote, "We don't know their story, we don't know what they're going through, we just know they need help. So help them." End quote. And if that's the impact Gander's actions had on just one family, it's hard to fathom the impact they had on the thousands who experienced or were inspired by those actions. In an article for the Times, Gander Constable Ozfudge notes that even 2 decades later, quote, "I still get a lot of messages, just thanking the people of Gander. I tell them that for us, it's normal. I'm still not sure what all the fuss is about." End quote. In the shadow of unimaginable tragedy, Gander showcased the world a tapestry of simple kindness, stitched together by the thousands of small ways people showed they cared. That's exactly what the world needed then, and that's exactly what the world still needs today. Like the people of Gander, we too have been placed in situations where we can serve, love, and help those around us. Situations as simple as sharing your shower, your golf clubs, or even just the fact that you care. And if in the wake of a global tragedy, a tiny town can heal hearts and impact the lives of generations to come, ultimately the question we should be asking is, what can you do? Because our small actions are of eternal significance. I'd like to leave you with the words of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 25, speaking about the last day. Quote, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. Thank you. My time today was 90 minutes and 54 seconds. Thank you guys so much for judging today. Is everybody okay? Thank you. Thank you so much for judging, sir. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much.